And we are live on YouTube, everyone.
Great, thank you. Okay, and it is the top of the hour, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome. This is the last of our February Interstate Bridge Replacement Program community briefings. And we want to thank you for taking the time to join us. We know you're really busy. We know it's been a long week. We really appreciate you spending an hour with us this evening. We're really excited to be in the midst of our first round of community engagement on replacing the interstate bridge on I-5 over the Columbia River. And my name is Kirsten Pennington. I'm part of the Interstate Bridge Replacement team, and I'll be hosting our time this evening for the next hour. So first, before we get started, there are some logistics since this is an online meeting. So for folks to note that this is a Zoom webinar or YouTube, it's being recorded and streamed on the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program YouTube channel. And after the meeting, the recording will be available on both YouTube and on the program website, which is www.interstatebridge.org. www.interstatebridge.org. Thank you. And we wanted to also share that closed captions are available for the meeting in both English and in Spanish. So to view the captions, you can go to the link that is shown on the slide, and I'll read it for folks as well. The link is https://ibr.news, NEWS/captions, CAPTIONS. And I'll say that just one more time. It's https://ibr.news/captions. And that's to get closed captions in either English or Spanish. Next slide. If you're watching this on Zoom, the controls for closed captions are actually at the bottom of the screen. So you should see a box that says CC on it. It's a little icon. And if you click on that, it turns the captions on. And if you click on it again, it turns them off. So it's pretty easy. If you don't see that on the bottom of your screen, you can hover your cursor around at the bottom and it'll probably pop up for you. We also wanted to share a phone number that you can call if you're experiencing technical difficulties throughout any of our time together this evening. It's 503-897-9219. And again, that number is 503-897-9219. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but just in case, we want to be prepared. Great. Well, the goal for the meeting this evening is to come to a shared understanding of what the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program is, why replacing the aging bridge is a high priority for the region, and of course, most importantly, how your voice can help to shape the outcome. And at the end of this meeting, we're also going to be sharing some additional ways that you can get involved with the program. So maybe a little bit about what's going to be happening this evening. We have a format that has a couple of different presentations. The folks that you will see on the screen will be sharing some information. We'll also be sharing some answers to frequently asked questions. We've been getting a lot of questions from the community about the program, and we wanted to highlight a couple that we thought would be most interesting for the audience tonight. We're also going to be trying something that we've done at 3 previous briefings in this series that's been kind of fun. It's a format that's a way to quickly get information with a lot of people online. It's some audience participation questions, and so those are interactive. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do that in just a minute. But this meeting format is a way that we can hear from a wide variety of people. We did want to be really clear, just to set expectations, that there's not opportunities for oral public testimony tonight. That's not the kind of briefing that this is. But as we move forward with the program, there will be a wide variety of opportunities for a lot of different ways to interact with the program. And Kimberly is going to talk about those in a little bit, but we'll get there in just a moment as we continue on this evening. So here's how the interactive questions will work. You can kind of see on the screen, and I'll describe it as well. A box will pop up with a question. There will be a variety of answers. With your mouse, you can click on your top two and then just press submit. And that real time will send in the information. It'll sort it through, and then we'll be able to see how everyone responded. It won't say how you individually, as an individual, responded, but it will combine all of the responses so that we can get a sense of how people are feeling about the different questions. So it is also really important to say, if you're currently watching on YouTube and you want to participate in the interactive questions, you should read the instructions listed in the YouTube so that you can go to the Zoom webinar, because that pop-up and that feature only works in the Zoom webinar option. And I'll remind us all as we get there later about that as well. So let me also introduce other folks who are here with me this evening. We have Frank Green, we have Chris Regan, Kimberly Pinchera, and Jake War. And I'll introduce each of them as they move into their presentation piece. And we'll head into our first audience participation question. So remember, this is the part that everyone in the audience gets to be part of. And you do need to be in your Zoom webinar format to participate. So the first question is about priorities, and it's about your priorities. And the question is, what are you most interested in learning about in today's presentation? And the options are, what is the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program? Plans for future community engagement and feedback? Potential benefits that a replacement may offer? The timeline and process for considering a bridge replacement? Or something else? So remember, pick the top two, and you do need to be in Zoom webinar to do this. And there's instructions in YouTube if you're not in that format. We'll give just a few minutes since this is the first one, a few seconds, and pick your top two. Okay, well, let's see what people had to say. Okay, let's see, we had 9 respondents, and it looks like of the 9 respondents, 78% wanted to hear about the timeline and process for considering a bridge replacement. 56% wanted to hear about plans for engagement and feedback. And then what's the program, potential benefits, and something else all had a good showing as well. So this is helpful just for all of us on the call to remember as we're presenting what folks were most interested in learning about this evening. So thanks for participating in that. Appreciate it. Okay, so let's get started with our first presentation, and I'd like to introduce you to the Program Assistant Administrator, Frank Green. Hi, Frank, you're up.
Hi, Kirsten, thank you. And thank you everyone for participating. We appreciate you spending a little bit of time this evening with us. And I am going to do a brief program overview and walk through some of the needs for this program. As illustrated on this slide, this is a picture that depicts the I-5 corridor through the Portland-Vancouver metro area. In the middle of the picture is the Columbia River and the Interstate Bridge, which crosses that river. The Interstate Bridge is actually composed of two bridges, side-by-side bridges. And those bridges were constructed, one of them is 104 years old and the other is 63 years old. And they were designed and constructed at a time that has them no longer meeting the current needs for modern commerce and travel. This bridge is one of two crossings within the Portland-Vancouver metro area and obviously serves as a very important connection between our communities. Replacing the Interstate Bridge has been a discussion for several decades with the regional partners, looking to replace it with a seismically resilient multimodal bridge that will provide for mobility of the people, goods, and services within the region is definitely a priority for both Oregon and Washington. As I mentioned, there have been planning efforts for the last couple of decades, really trying to look at what the need is to replace these bridges, as well as what the alternatives should be. Recognizing that this is an important issue, both Oregon and Washington provided funding in 2019 to begin the effort that we're currently undertaking right now. And the governors from both states signed a memorandum of intent that assembled a program team and began the work to engage stakeholders and reevaluate the transportation needs. The next several slides is really I'm going to walk through the previously identified needs and what the program will be intending to solve. Next slide, please. So this picture depicts asphalt that's crumbled and broken. Something that you'd see, due to a seismic event, and one of the key aspects for a need to replace this bridge, as I mentioned, with the age of them, one being 104 and one being 63, as I had said, is that they were designed and constructed in a time when we didn't have the understanding for current seismic standards that we have today. There's vulnerabilities in both the superstructure, which is the part of the bridge that you drive on or see above you as you're driving on it, as well as the substructure, which is the part of the bridge that you can't see because it's going, down into the water and into the ground. There's the lift towers that you see as you're approaching the bridge or as you're driving through it are also designed to not meet the current loads that you'd see during a seismic event. Speaking a little bit to the substructure or those foundations that are below the water, they're comprised of primarily, they're comprised of timber piles that are embedded in sandy soils. And previous engineering studies have shown that those soils don't act and don't perform well in a large earthquake. One of the notes on this slide talks about the big one is coming, what will happen to Portland. Identifies that Pacific Northwest is long overdue for a devastating earthquake. This program in our region does lie within the Cascadia subduction zone area, and those earthquakes, happen once every several hundred years. The last one on record, according to scientists, happened around 1700, and it was a 9.0 earthquake. And so, that kind of leads to scientists predicting that there's a 37% chance within the next 50 years that a magnitude 7.1 or larger earthquake will happen. If one of those earthquakes were to happen, there's a considerable concern that these bridges will not be serviceable after a major earthquake. A replacement bridge is needed to be able to meet the modern requirements for seismic. Next slide, please. This slide shows traffic on one of the existing I-5 bridges. As you can see, it's coming down off of the hump that currently exists on the bridge. And growing travel demand and congestion is definitely one of the needs that we need to address with the program. In 2019, the traffic data showed that traffic clogs the freeway from up to 7 to 11 hours during the weekday, and that continues to rise as people need to use the freeway to get between our communities. The pandemic did have an effect on how much traffic was using not just the interstate freeway, but all of the roads within the region. But we've seen, that those numbers have bounced back, and that they're quickly approaching back to the pre-COVID numbers as the pandemic has gone on here. Projections and forecasted use for the I-5 corridor shows that, in the coming years moving forward, travel demand and congestion is just expected to continue to increase. What are some of the impacts of congestion on our freeway? There's freight that comes into the two ports that are very close to the I-5 bridges that will get stuck in this congestion. Commuters who are trying to get to and from work or school or to a needed resource that they have also get impacted by congestion. And so another key aspect of these existing bridges is the lift span. The lift span, when it lifts to allow for someone on the river to navigate through this stretch of the Columbia, it stops the freeway and causes congestion and backups. And this is one of only a dozen stop signs on interstate facilities throughout the country. When the lift span goes up, obviously, like I said, people stopping and the backup causes congestion that takes some time after the lift is done to balance out. Next slide, please. On this slide, you see C-Train Express bus. As I mentioned with the freight and commuter traffic, the congestion that this stretch of the freeway sees also impacts transit service. Currently, the express bus service that C-Tran provides is the only transit option for commuters or for people to take. The C-Tran bus service and this transit service is subjected to the same congestion as well as any accidents or bridge lifts that occur. This picture does show the bridge lifts as the bus is going underneath it. Because it's subjected to the same congestion and bridge lifts and accidents, it's sometimes hard to predict or provide reliability for the transit trip that people are trying to take. And it also impacts how long the trip would take. Currently, on both sides of the river, there is high capacity transit service, but it doesn't extend across the river. So in Portland, you have the Max light rail that ends just south of the bridge at the Expo Center, and in Clark County, you have the Vine service from C-Tran that ends just north of the river. And so trying to look at options that provide options to the community and to users is an important need for this program. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the inadequate active transportation options and choices that people encounter. The image on the slide shows the sidewalk that's on the existing bridge, and it is a narrow sidewalk with a low railing. So as you're traveling across the bridge, either by walking or using a bike or rolling, it isn't a pleasant experience. On one side of view, so in this picture, to the left-hand side of the image is the interstate freeway, which has no shoulders and narrow lanes. So as you're traveling across this sidewalk, you're very close to interstate traffic. On the other side is the river, and like I said, there's a low railing for it. The Navigation off of the bridge, so where do you go once you get across the bridge, is also difficult. And navigating through the entire program area, whether you're walking, biking, or rolling, is difficult. Modern facilities for active transportation are absolutely a needed piece for a replacement bridge. Next slide. And this slide shows two images. On the left is an image that depicts the closely spaced interchanges within the program area. Typical spacing for interchanges that you'd want to see for safe operations of a freeway facility are desirable to be 2 miles spaced apart or minimum 1 mile. And as you can see on this graphic, within a 5-mile stretch of I-5, there's 7 interchanges, and none of those interchanges are spaced to either of those desirable or minimal distances. Which with that closely spaced interchange, you have a lot of merging and weaving needing to happen, which impacts the safety and operation of this corridor. On the right-hand side, a right-hand picture, you see an incident on the bridge. So whenever there's an accident or anything that happens on the bridge, with the narrow lanes and limited shoulders, an incident on the bridge really does shut down a significant portion of the bridge, which in and of itself causes backup as well as congestion. I mentioned before in a previous picture that showed the congestion, the hump on the bridge. The hump is also a feature on the bridge that causes safety problems due to how far a driver can see. And so with the hump, as you're going up and over the hump, if there's congestion or if someone stops immediately on the other side, you have a limited time to react and slow down. So all of these things that I mentioned with the closely spaced interchanges, which provides minimal amount of merging into traffic or weaving to try to get on and off the freeway, the narrow shoulders, the narrow lanes, and the the hump, caused this to be a very high accident location within our state. One of the other things that I've mentioned, as I have on other slides, the lift span itself. When a lift happens, people aren't necessarily expecting to have to stop on the freeway, so that stopping on the freeway has caused an increase in incidents during that time as well. All of these, safety and all of these safety issues and the high accident rate can be addressed with a new modern replacement bridge. And so with that, I think I'd like to turn it back to you, Kirsten.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frank. That was a lot of really helpful information. And I wanted to ask a question that came up in some of our prior briefings as well. And the question is around, why would we not just build a new third bridge in addition to the I-5 and I-205 bridges instead of replacing the existing I-5 bridge? So could you talk a little bit about that, please? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a good question. That is a question I think that has been asked for quite some time through some of the previous planning exercises. And, really, I do think that's a question that this region should talk about. But some of the work that has previously been done really has shown that a third bridge doesn't really address the needs that I just walked through. It doesn't help us with the need to improve this connection, to really replace this crossing that is very important to the economy of our region, to support local jobs and families, and this vital trade route that is local, state, and national freeway facility. And one of the things that we know is that the I-5 is not planned to be relocated. And so replacing these bridges is very important to meet the needs to get a modern, safe, reliable bridge in this location.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I think that's a helpful answer for a lot of people. It's probably on a lot of people's minds in the audience. So thanks for addressing that. Okay, so let's move to our next audience participation question. You just heard Frank talk about some of the issues with the existing bridge, but we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you think. What is your experience with the existing bridge? So the question is, what are your concerns with the existing interstate bridge? And you can pick two. So the options are earthquake vulnerability, limited public transit, transportation safety, congestion and reliability, inadequate bike and pedestrian paths, impaired freight movement, or other. And as folks are voting, I'll remind people that might have joined a little bit late that this poll option is only available in the Zoom webinar option. So if you're in YouTube, you won't be able to see that pop up, but there should be instructions on how to switch over if you want to participate. Okay, well, let's see what folks had to say.
Hey, Kirsten, it's Brent here.
Yeah.
Looks like the polling is not working as expected from Zoom, so I can read the results real quick.
Oh, okay, that would be great. Thank you.
So we had 11 respondents, and 55% chose congestion and reliability as their top concern with the existing interstate bridge, followed real closely with limited public transit at 36%. And then a tie between earthquake vulnerability, transportation safety, and inadequate bike and pedestrian path, with impaired freight and other both also receiving votes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brent. And can you let us know how many respondents there were?
There was 11 respondents this time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And for folks, if you have the poll in front of you and you can't figure out how to get it out of the way, you should be able to click on the X and it'll disappear. So if people are having that problem, and then Jake reminded me at a prior briefing that we had that if you're not seeing all the responses on your screen, you can scroll down in the box and it should show the remaining. So just so that folks know about that. Okay, great. Well, thank you. And that's really helpful because we have, our team is immersed in many of the challenges with the bridge, but it's really important that we're hearing from you about what's important and what your concerns are. So thank you for that. So next up, we have Chris Regan, who is our environmental manager for the IBR program. And Chris will talk about the timeline and the environmental process. Chris?
Thanks, Kirsten. Really appreciate it. It's also really nice to know that if nature throws us a curveball, Brent's got us. So thanks, Brent, for that. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just jump straight into the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program's timeline. What you see in front of you is a graphic. And I really like to say that before we know where we are and where we're going, it's important to know where we've been. And so this graphic is cut into two pieces. The first piece represents the prior planning efforts that took place between 2004 and 2014 that led to an environmental impact statement and record of decision for a Columbia River crossing. The amount of effort that went into that, the amount of work that's there, and the great information is an incredible place for us to start with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. And as Frank said earlier, about 2019, both states got together and started talking about how do we start up the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program to look at these problems that still exist within our corridor and get to a solution. So in 2019, we started talking about funding, how to restart the program, and now we're in the middle of our planning and environmental process. Within that process, we're looking at the specific environmental documentation, and it will hopefully lead us in 2024 to a preferred alternative that we can give to our designers to take a look at. They'll spend about a year, and then we hope to start construction in 2025. As you can see with all of these efforts, community engagement is an important foundation for all of this work. Next slide, please. And part of the reason why we need community engagement is based in our federal environmental process. The federal environmental process that we use is done through the National Environmental Policy Act. The National Environmental Policy Act process was created to ensure that for any given project, the public has a voice and the environmental impacts are studied. You've got two pictures on the slide. The picture on the left talks about those two pillars, community engagement, environmental impacts. NEPA was signed in 1970, about the time that a number of environmental catastrophes were happening in the nation. And there was also a lot of federal work that was happening without looking for the community to provide input and their concerns before decisions were made. The National Environmental Policy Act required decision makers to understand environmental impacts and ensure that our community voices were heard as we move forward to deciding how to go about a specific project. The picture on the right is a picture of the typical community engagement process that might occur if we weren't all in quarantine. Hopefully we'll get back there soon. Next slide, please. And community engagement is really critical to all aspects of the program, especially at this early stage. We're going to hear a lot more about that in just a little bit. In 2021, we're going to need your support in the following activities to help shape future alternatives. Right now, our program is looking at updating the purpose and need for our projects. This is necessary for proceeding through the environmental review process in NEPA. We'll also be establishing community vision and values. Those vision and values are going to help us to develop screening criteria for evaluating alternatives. As we go forward through this process, we're going to be looking for your voice to help us make sure that we're headed the right direction. Next slide, please. And when we started this work, we started the work with a bi-state legislative committee that was made up of 8 members from each state. Through our conversations with the legislature in both states, we talked about creating groups to help guide our work. We have an executive steering group. That group provides regional leadership, guidance, and recommendations on key program development topics. It's made up of our transportation partners in the general area and help provide the steering that our program is looking for. On top of that, we've got 2 advisory groups. We have an equity advisory group and a community advisory group. The equity advisory group provides insight and input on the program's processes, approaches, and decisions that may affect historically underserved and underrepresented communities. Our community advisory group provides input and feedback reflective of the community's needs, issues, and concerns to influence our program's outcomes. Next slide, please. Right now, as I said earlier, we're really focused on updating our purpose and need. In NEPA, the purpose is a concise statement that identifies the proposed action is intended to accomplish. It's stated broadly so that more than one solution can be considered. And then our needs are written with evidence of deficiencies and problems. It explains why the proposed action has been undertaken, identifies existing or expected future problems within a defined area. And as Frank went into great detail, identifying the needs that were on the previous effort, we've identified 6 previous needs: seismic vulnerability, inadequate bicycle and pedestrian facilities, limited public transportation operation, connectivity and reliability, growing travel demand and congestion, safety and vulnerability to incidents, and impaired freight movement. Next slide. The other part of developing screening alternatives is focusing on our community's vision and values. Our vision and values are the foundation for developing criteria and performance measures to evaluate those alternatives and make sure that we're addressing the community's concerns. Our previously identified vision and values include community livability or quality of life, mobility, reliability, accessibility, congestion reduction and efficiency, modal choice, safety, regional economy and freight mobility, stewardship of natural and human resources, distribution of impacts and benefits, cost effectiveness and financial resources, and bi-state cooperation. Next slide, please. The graphic you see before you is talking a little bit about how we plan to gather feedback to update the purpose and need and establish community visions and values. As we've said before, we're starting with evaluating our prior planning efforts. We're looking at the purpose and need statements that were established before, looking at the vision and values, and we're asking ourselves, what has changed? In the middle column, we talk about planning and regulatory policies and goals that might have changed, looking at new data and conducting new analysis. We're using previous NEPA work to identify constraints and commitments that were out there, community values. And then we're taking that information and looking for feedback and recommendations from our general community engagement, from community advisory group, the equity advisory group. We're asking regulatory agencies, tribes, our executive steering group, and the bi-state legislative committee. All of that feedback on what has changed will lead us to the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program's purpose and need. Previously identified transportation problems that haven't been resolved and new transportation problems that have emerged. The IBR vision and values is going to help define program success, reflect community values, and identify local goals and targets. You might wonder, how are the purpose and need and vision and values applied to the IBR program? It's going to help us document why changes require new solutions, to establish evaluation criteria to screen alternatives, to evaluate prior alternatives and inform development of new alternatives, and to identify or modify locally preferred alternative. I know that's a lot, Kirsten, but I think that's about where I hand it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And I think you might know what question is coming to you because it's been an audience favorite, this question. It's on the minds of many. So I have a question for you around how will the new bridge be funded and will there be tolls? So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I
Chris?
get it. That's questions out there on a lot of people's minds. And given the scarcity of federal and state funding for large transportation projects nationwide, it's really assumed that any bridge replacement alternative is going to require funding from a diverse range of sources. And that includes federal grants, tolling, and state funds from both Oregon and Washington. So our program is working on a financial plan that balances cost estimates and potential funding sources, and that's going to be updated as work continues to identify and analyze river crossing and transit alternatives. The program scope will ultimately be tailored to align with available funding, but tolling is definitely one of those elements in there, Kirsten.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that, Chris. I know that's on the minds of a lot of people, so appreciate it. All right, Brent, we're going to try to go to our next round of audience participation. So this is about priorities again, and you should be able to see the questions on your pop-up box on your screen. If you're joining late, head on over to the Zoom webinar to get engaged. So the question is, which of the following do you view as an important priority to address as we consider options for the Interstate Bridge? You get to pick two, remember. The options are supporting jobs in the economy, reducing traffic congestion, ensuring earthquake safety, offering choices for how people can travel, whether by car, transit, walking, biking, rolling, evaluating the potential impact on neighboring communities, improving road safety, or minimizing environmental and/or climate impacts. Give folks a couple of seconds to think about your priorities. Oh, and Brent, you got it working. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so folks can see it looks like we had 8 respondents and a couple of ties for the top priorities. So supporting jobs in the economy, reducing traffic congestion, offering travel choices, and minimizing environmental and/or climate impacts, with ensuring earthquake safety and evaluating potential impact on neighboring communities also making a showing. Great, well, thank you. This is, again, used by the program team to help shape the types of solutions that will be looked at moving forward. So thanks for your participation in that. Okay, I'm now going to turn it over to our next presenter, Jake War, who is a transportation planner with lots of expertise in centering equity and inclusion in public projects. And Jake, I think you're talking with us about how the program is planning to center equity in all aspects. So I'll turn it to you.
Exactly. Thanks, Kirsten. And happy almost Friday, everybody. So yeah, as Kirsten said, I'm going to talk about the program's commitment to really making sure that we infuse equity throughout everything we do and the outcomes that we're seeking. And I'd like to start this by talking a little bit about kind of our federal obligations. I've got a logo here of the US Department of Transportation and some guidance that they provide as we go through the NEPA process that Chris talked about. So they kind of provide three general guidelines. And one is ensuring the full and fair participation by all potentially affected communities. The next one is avoiding, minimizing, or mitigating disproportionately high and adverse human health and environmental effects. And that includes social and economic effects on minority and low-income populations. And then the third is preventing the denial of, reduction in, or significant delay in the receipt of benefits that the project has to offer by minority and low-income populations. So that's the guidance piece, the kind of regulatory piece. But what we're committed to is having that as sort of a floor and going beyond that. So next slide, please. So we want to go beyond this compliance frame and towards true equity as much as we can. So the way that we're framing it is how might a project look if, instead of just looking at the disproportionate negative impacts that are possible, what if it disproportionately benefited historically marginalized communities, communities of color, low-income communities, people with disabilities, et cetera? What if it centered the voices of those communities? And what if the processes from planning, community engagement, everything we do in contracting, what if those were considered concrete outcomes in and of themselves? So on here, on this slide, I have accompanying these bullets a photo of, it's a mural that's actually on the State Department of Transportation building in Massachusetts that shows some transportation and environmental justice advocates. It was an organization that put together that mural. Next slide, please. How we're actually operationalizing equity, how we are really centering equity is multifaceted. So first, we are grounding the program in the history of the river, the I-5 corridor, and the region. Includes the history of indigenous peoples, history of the African-American community in the I-5 corridor, Vanport, that sort of thing, so that we can really acknowledge that and then address some of those issues as much as possible. We have a Chief Equity Officer, John L. Bell, so he's the actual leader on this equity effort for the program. I'm on his team. We've set up an equity advisory group that's made up of community members, representatives of organizations from the community, and then equity experts among our program partners. And the purpose of that group is first to provide, to help us develop a program specific definition of equity, because when people say equity, a lot of times they mean something different. So we want to be on the same page about what that means for this program. We are, in addition to that, we are trying to make sure we are intentional and inclusive in all of our community engagement strategies, and Kimberly is going to be talking about that in more detail. We are working towards language accessibility and inclusion for those whose first language is not English or might have difficulty speaking or reading or understanding English. And then we are likewise trying to ensure accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities. So something that you may have picked up on as we've gone through this is we're trying to make sure we read everything on slides and describe images, because something that we've learned is that people who are visually impaired, they with Zoom actually can't, the screen readers can't actually say what's on the screen. So we're trying to make that inclusive as much as possible for all to be able to participate. And then finally, we are providing education and training for the program staff on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that everyone really plays a part and really stays true to this commitment that our program administrator has said, equity is not one person's or one group's responsibility. It's all of ours. So we're trying to make sure that that happens. I believe that's the end of my stuff.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. I think we're going to go into an audience participation question on equity. So you should see that up on your screen. And thanks, Jake, for giving that really helpful overview of what the plans are for the program. And I know there's more information on the website about that. So the question that's up on the screen for everyone is, which of the following communities do you have connections with? And who would you be willing to share IBR program information with? So you can pick two, and the options are Black, Indigenous, and/or other communities of color, people who would like to engage in a language besides English, people experiencing low incomes, people with disabilities, people who are older, people who are younger, or other. Okay, let's see our results. Out of our respondents, it looks like 57% of you said folks who are older, and then a good representation of the other options that we had. So that's great. It's good to know how we can all reach between the program and our communities and ensure that all voices are heard and we're having true two-way communication with the community and the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Thank you. Okay, Kimberly, I'd like to introduce Kimberly Pinchera, who is the IBR Program Communications Manager. So welcome, Kimberly.
Great, thank you so much, Kirsten. And we will just jump right in. Next slide, like perfect, thank you. So, you know, the rest of my panel teammates here have done a really great job of setting up this part of the presentation for me. So, you know, Chris has done a great job of kind of walking us through how community engagement and how these efforts really are critical to help shape the program and how it really informs those pieces of the decision-making in program work. And Jake just did a great job of highlighting how we are really trying to center equity in all aspects of our program work. That is absolutely true when it comes to our community engagement efforts. And alongside equity, we also have 4 other priorities that are really the foundation of the values that we're bringing to that community engagement work that we're doing. So alongside equity, there's diversity, accessibility, transparency, and inclusion. And you'll see those represented on this slide with as circles with arrows connecting them to each other to really represent that those are all really interconnected. So with all of the outreach and engagement efforts that we're doing, we're really trying to look at it through the lens of these priorities and really ask ourselves, are we meeting these values? Are there ways that we can be doing better? Are there ways we can improve? So certainly that comes to making sure that we are trying to reach as many voices as possible. And part of that is offering, you know, different ways to engage. So different types of tools, looking at different times to engage, providing multiple avenues for people to provide us feedback, because we really want to have as many perspectives as possible and hear from as many people as possible. And that's also making sure that our meetings and materials and everything else are as inclusive and accessible as possible. So Jake also, you know, highlighted some of the efforts that we're doing there to make sure that we really are looking at all of those efforts comprehensively to make sure that we are offering materials in an accessible format, and that we're continuing to improve and evaluate, you know, how we conduct our meetings and events as well. And it's certainly transparency. We want to be very open and clear with the public, both in terms of the process, how decisions are being made, how people can influence that process, and also being accountable to the public and having that information available and easy to find. You know, so whether that's media materials or engagement opportunities that we're really making that accessible, easy to find, and holding ourselves accountable and giving the public a way to hold ourselves accountable as well. Next slide, please. So this is a long list. This is just trying to give an kind of highlight of some of the different tools and avenues where we are trying to use in these engagement efforts. So some of these are the specific tools that we're using. Some of them are the ways we're trying to engage with people and get the word out that these engagement opportunities are happening. So we've mentioned the public meetings, the different advisory groups that we have. All of those meetings are open to the public. The meetings are recorded. So if someone can't participate live, they are always able to watch those videos after the meetings occur. Meeting materials are also posted, and there are always opportunities to provide input to those groups before the meeting, at the meeting, or after the meeting. We are also hosting targeted outreach events such as our online open house and survey that we have open right now that I'll get to on the next slides. And we are really trying to look at those kind of targeted milestones throughout program development when there is a specific targeted question or area where we're asking the community to give us input on, that we are really being very intentional about our outreach efforts and trying to solicit as much input from the community as possible during those timeframes and those milestones. We're hosting live virtual events such as this. So that's just another avenue to try to give people a different opportunity and different way to get information on the program and learn about what is going on with our efforts. As Jake mentioned, we're working directly with multicultural outreach liaisons to help us connect directly with communities of concern. We're also reaching out directly to community-based organizations, one asking them to help share these opportunities for input within their own organizations, also offering to come to them to give briefings. So on later slides, we'll have the contact information for the program available. We are always open to come present to your organization and provide briefings as well. Then in terms of some of the just kind of general outreach tools that we're trying to use both to connect with people and also to get the word out about these types of opportunities, we're trying to be very proactive on social media. We launched our program website just a little over a month ago. Hard to believe it's only been that long now. Also doing some very proactive media outreach, again, just trying to get information out in the public sphere, both about program updates and opportunities to engage. We're also doing that through our own direct email notifications. So that includes an e-newsletter every month, as well as other email updates throughout the month in between those e-newsletters. We are doing it right now, comprehensive kind of advertising campaign that includes a number of different sources, including digital print, direct mail, and radio advertising, again, to try to get to people from different avenues, different ways, and making sure that we're reaching people with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different types of stakeholders. Later on in the year, as we continue our work, we'll continue to build upon these efforts, and you'll see us start to add additional tools and events and activities on top of these. So, we're looking at the possibility of doing listening sessions, working groups, focus groups, discussion groups, things that let us have a little bit more of a targeted conversation on specific topics. We'll look at folding in some other kind of creative tools like video storytelling and podcast series and other avenues such as that. Next slide, please. So mention this right now, we have kind of two big components of our outreach efforts right now that are ongoing. So first is an online open house that will close on March 1st. So this is available kind of prominently on our website at www.interstatebridge.org. And you can find it. It's actually available in 8 languages in addition to English through the website platform. So that includes Russian and Ukrainian, Chinese, and both simplified and traditional, Somali, Korean, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And there's an opportunity to provide specific input through the online open house itself, but it also links to an interactive survey. And that is where we're really trying to ask people to take the time, take a few minutes to complete the survey, and that will give us a little bit more targeted feedback from you. So if we want to jump to the next slide, I can continue that. So that's the second piece of our kind of big outreach efforts at the moment, is that interactive survey. And again, you can access that through the online open house on the website. But really, this is intended to give us some more detailed feedback and input from the public as we continue these discussions that Chris overviewed regarding the purpose and need and the vision and values. So this, because of the platform, we're limited to 3 languages. So it's available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese on the web platform, but we do have printed copies available in those 8 other languages as well that I previously mentioned. So our multicultural outreach liaisons will be using those copies as well. And we can also, as a program, always get copies printed to anyone in the public or help people walk through those, the survey if they need help and assistance from us. So next slide, please. So other ways to engage, like I said, is we're certainly hoping people will take the time to complete the survey during this time. But as we mentioned, the advisory groups and the executive steering group are meeting monthly, sometimes more than monthly, and always have an opportunity for input directly to those advisory groups. You can access all of the meetings and those opportunities to engage with them directly at www.interstatebridge.org/calendar. You can also, I mentioned our direct email notifications. You can sign up for our e-newsletter notifications at www.interstatebridge.org/contact. And I mentioned, if you would like either, even if you just want to ask a question or leave a comment, or if you would like to request a briefing from the program team, you can contact us by email or by phone number. And that email is info, I-N-F-O, @interstatebridge.org. And we do have 3 different phone numbers. I will just read the toll-free number that anyone can call at 888-503-6735. I try to make up a little time, Kirsten, so hopefully we're back on time, but thank you.
We're all great. Thank you so much. And that was a great overview of all the many ways that we're hoping that you stay involved with us as we move through this program over the coming years. We really hope that one of these speaks to you and is a way that you prefer to be engaged with the program. And actually, that's what our next interactive audience participation option or opportunity includes. So this question, Kimberly went over a lot of information, a lot of different opportunities. We'd like to hear what's most important to you. How do you prefer to engage with the opportunities that we'll be talking about with this program? So the question is, and you should see it up on your screen, how do we meet our community where they are and listen to what is important? You can pick up to 2, and the options are to host virtual or in-person events, to use social media, to provide access to team members. So that's some of the phone numbers and direct access that Kimberly was talking about at the end of her presentation. Seek input through surveys or other. Okay, and we have the results in, and it looks like 60% preferred attending virtual or in-person events. And I will comment just a little bit. This was consistent. We did 4 of these briefings. This is our 4th one. And everyone overwhelmingly said that people would prefer to be at virtual or in-person events. And I know that this team that has been with you this evening would really like to be in person with you. We're doing the best we can virtually and trying to make it so that there's a lot of opportunity for engagement, but we are excited to be in person with you when we are able. Other respondents said social media, 50%, 40% access to team members, 30% input through surveys, and then other. And we'll be looking to hear from you about what that other might be at our website and other future opportunities. Thank you so much. Okay, well, we are at the end of our hour together. Thank you everyone so much for taking the time to be with us here this evening, learning more about the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. We hope you found it helpful. We hope you continue to engage in some of the many ways that, that were listed out. If you want to take a look at what those were again, they're on the website, www.interstatebridge.org. We really want to move through this program with you. That partnership with the community is really, really important to the people of this program and the goals and the values of this program. So we're looking forward to continuing to engage with you. Hopefully that'll be in person soon, and really hope that you stay healthy and well. Take care and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.